All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Vaishali Jain, and I'll be your moderator today. And thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. So we're very excited to host today's webinar on developing and retaining millennial talent through career resources. And presenting today's topic is Vincent Supa. Just a little bit about Vincent. He's a global HR polymath and self-described member of Generation Flux. Using his operational experience across multiple industries spanning 3 continents, he now consults, teaches at New York University, and is an active member of HR Avant-Garde. As long as HR continues to be the gatekeepers to the jobs people want, Vincent will continue to give those around him, including those attending today's webinar, the prerequisite mindset to navigate their professional world to their advantage. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic, and we offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored towards your specific requirements. So if you're interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with one of our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Also, today's session is being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. And I'd like to invite Peter O'Keefe, who is our Chief Learning Officer at Netcom Learning, to discuss some Netcom Learning values and other important things.
Hey, thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. Yes, Netcom Learning helps customers build an innovative learning organization by achieving a smarter workforce, adopting a change, and driving growth. We do that with these 3 pillars that we have here, which are our broad offerings, our customized learning plans, and our ability to deliver globally. There's more information on our website on this. On the next slide, we also talk about our 5 service pillars, which we get into helping organizations with consulting around learning initiatives, content development, various types of delivery, and learning technology and administration. We've been doing this since 1989 to empower our companies that we service with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address the changes that are going on in the businesses that we serve. On the next slide, we share that we have 9 practice areas that we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the business and leadership practice area. At the end of our presentation, you'll be introduced to our Sarder Learning collaborative knowledge platform, for which we provide business and leadership training. Of course, we have a full catalog of instructor-led training and other services on our website, of which can be customized and delivered privately. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Vaishali and our subject matter expert today, Vincent.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for that. So just getting back to our webinar and why you should be attending this webinar, some of the benefits you'll be getting out of it. You'll learn how to build an employment brand and recruiting process that will outsell your competition and boost the quality of Gen Y applicants you receive. You'll discover how to revamp your strategy to include development methods most valued by Gen Y talent. You'll see examples of the latest trends in career development tools, ideas, and technology that are working to keep this group of early career employees motivated and focused on contributing discretionary effort to your company's bottom line. So we'll just give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To start with, you have the option to adjust the window size to your liking. Simply hit the escape key and you'll find the Zoom button on the top left corner of your GoToWebinar viewer. And everyone has been muted except for our presenters. So please feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters in the question pane, and we can address them throughout the session. There's also a PDF copy of today's slides that are in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Vincent, our presenter for today. Vincent?
Thank you, Vaishali. Welcome, everyone. Developing and retaining millennial talent through career resources. Let's talk about today's agenda. We'll be covering the most important job factors for attracting and retaining people in their early career. We'll also delve into employment branding strategies and the messaging specifically geared towards millennials. We'll cover career support strategies that work for Gen Y employees and the use of integrated talent management technology systems. We will conclude our talk by discussing the ramifications of gamification, specifically geared towards learning and development and career development, and we'll cover a few case studies from Fortune 500 companies. Let us begin. The most important job factors for attracting and retaining early career employees. Well, attracting the best millennial professionals starts with understanding what motivates millennials. Now, according to surveys, 70% of top millennials change their job because of bigger salary bonuses, more fulfilling jobs, or better career development opportunities. So there's really an arbitrage opportunity here. Not everyone simply leaves for more money, but often millennials leave because they're not being developed as much as they desire. Now, to retain millennial professionals, employers must show an ongoing commitment to their careers, providing formal feedback at least, and I stress at least every 6 months, shows millennial employees that their performance and development is a priority and prevents them from looking to other employers who can meet this need. Now, let us talk about millennials and what they really want from their jobs. Now, millennials want more than just a job. In fact, most of us do. We don't want a job. We want a career. They say that with a job, time moves very slow, but when you have a career, there's never enough time. So millennials want more than a job. They want a career, and 69% of millennials cite a clear path for progression in the business for a reason in wanting to remain committed to the business. So this is one of the most important factors for millennials, career progression, which really has to be built on a foundation of learning and development.
So Vincent, how is this generation different than some of the preceding generations that came before them?
Preceding generations really looked at work and leisure and family as siloed activities. So all of us need to self-actualize, but previous generations might self-actualize just as much from a separate hobby or leisure activity and just go to work because they needed to earn money to cover the lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: food, shelter, safety. But now, especially with technology, everyone has an iPhone or another device. We see a merging of leisure and work. Consequently, millennials see self-actualization through their job as equally important as self-actualization through other parts of their lives. So in conclusion, Vishali, in the past, people looked at work as a separate activity from leisure, but now millennials, they're just as likely to be working in evenings, on weekends, on their computers at home. So they really want to see that fulfillment across every aspect of their life. So there's a general blurring of leisure and work. Essentially, millennials need to enjoy what they're doing and feel that they're being self-actualized as a result.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, employment branding strategies. Let's talk about that for a moment. Millennial workers feel more at home in a digital workplace than any generation in the past, simply because they grew up with it. So they're used to adapting to new technologies. Now, the implications for business is huge. Because we now work in a digital landscape, companies are less likely to have expansive real estate. So if they have 100 employees, they may have an office that could accommodate 50 to 70 employees using hoteling. Less real estate, the less money you're spending on SG&A costs, and the more your net income is. So with Generation Y coming into the business, hierarchies are now disappearing. So Gen Y expects to work in communities of interest and passions, not just structural hierarchies. So what does this mean? We're looking at flat organizations, traditional vertical command and control hierarchies where the CEO told the vice president, who told the director, who told the manager, who told the staff what to do. That is going out the window. And this calls to mind the Athena Project, which really says that the world is going to be run by women and people who think like women. What this means is that most value creation is now being handled horizontally across the enterprises along flat organizations, as different companies have different business-to-business relationships with other companies. This is a reflection of decreased vertical integration. Now, decreased vertical integration means that companies are spending more of their SG&A costs working with vendors, as opposed to having the entire span of control, which is called high vertical integration, within their own structure. So also, when we talk about branding, let's talk about marketing. Now, marketing has to do with external customers, and internal marketing, which is really what human resource departments should be. Internal marketing is about internal customers, which are the employees. So when we're looking for a branding recruitment strategy for millennials, we don't have to go too far, because that branding strategy has already been developed with the marketing department. Now, what I see happening in the future with clients that I work with, we have the internal marketing department, which is what I call HR departments, actually working with the external marketing department, which is traditionally simply called marketing, into developing a cohesive branding strategy. Often we have companies that have a recruitment strategy which really operates siloed from the marketing department's external strategy. So think of employees and think of internal customers as really the employees. Now, your employees, the way millennials view their commitment and relationship with the company is that they view themselves as the brand ambassadors to the companies they work for, and they have a megaphone. So Vishali, that megaphone is called social media. So in conclusion, we want to see a recruitment branding strategy to attract millennials to be holistically aligned with the marketing strategy that the company uses for their external customers.
I have a question that's come in, Vincent.
Yes.
It's around career progression and career journey. So the question is it career progression or a career journey? I understand that millennials are less interested in upward progression and seek experiences, both laterally and vertically.
Okay, so I would be remiss if I lumped all millennials into one homogeneous group. Millennials come from various backgrounds and a diversity of cultures. So my first answer to the question is, let's not consider millennials as just one homogeneous group, because that really wouldn't be fair to millennials. None of us wants to be seen as simply part of a monolith without our individuality. But I will tell you, from my experience with students, many of the millennials, yes, they want more experience, but they want to make sure that people in my demographic aren't selling them how experiences is really the most important thing, so we don't have to pay them. Right? So the millennials that I work with, they're very much about both. They don't want to forego being able to afford their own home because they simply bought into the paradigm that experiences is more important than actual career progression. Now, career progression usually correlates to higher earning potentials. So this is the first generation that, as a group collectively, they are not living better than the generation before them. So I do think it's both. I do think that we have to let millennials, that we're just as interested in them developing an earning potential, because a lot of millennials feel that that might be a sleight of hand, companies telling them just worry about the experience. That's more important than career progression, which means it's more important than earning. And they do want to feel financially secure. So my answer would be both, and not to lump all millennials together, because there are even exceptions to the answer that I just gave, depending on the individuality of specific millennials. Does that make sense, Vishali?
That makes sense.
Okay, so on this next slide, thank you for the question. On this next slide, we're talking about the workplace and the workforce and how they're really changing pretty dramatically as we go forward. Now, the entire concept of work is going to become more flexible. Skills needed in the workforce are going to be less about IQ and a little bit more about EQ. Because when you think about it, a lot of IQ knowledge is going to be available at our fingertips through handheld devices and computers and other platforms. Now, this really speaks to what I mentioned on the previous slide about the Athena Project, stating that the world will be run by women and people who think like women, meaning that most of the value that's going to be created is no longer going to be created in vertical command and control structures, but in flat organizations where the relationships between units of productivity become very important. Relationships, that means EQ. Now, why are we saying that IQ knowledge is going to be less relevant? Because of this, the commoditization of knowledge. Now, 20, 25, 30 years ago, there was a board game called Trivial Pursuit, and it really tested people's knowledge. The game Trivial Pursuit is not really common as much as it were in the past because all of the knowledge is available through people's devices. So because of the commoditization of knowledge and how most value is created across the enterprise, relationships, meaning emotional quotient, that's going to be more important in value creation. And you can see some of the statistics that we have on the slide. Career support strategies that work for Gen Y workers. Now, employers need to ensure that they have strategies and policies in place to facilitate the career progression for employees, and that they communicate to potential employees during the recruitment process what is in store for them in terms of career progression. Now, remember, we had an excellent question before. Career progression is correlated to earning, and I believe millennials are just as interested in economic security as generations in the past. Now, remember, money in and of itself is not important, but you cannot self-actualize if you're constantly worried about paying your rent. So we're not talking about wealth, we're talking about economic security. So now, what could employers communicate to Gen Y employees? Well, it's about how gaining valuable experience, that they can gain valuable experience from day one on the job. And we want Gen Y employees to know that the employers place as much importance on their career progress as they do on these other factors. One, personalized training, because a third of the millennials rank personalized training as one of the most important ways to engage them. Now, the most common form of training is on-the-job training, but in an area of mass customization, we now see training customized. We see a lot of higher ed learning technology platforms able to personalize the training as well. Another factor that employees want to communicate to their Gen Y employees is that other strategies that they could avail themselves to is regular formal feedback and recognition of accomplishments. Now, 91% of millennials say they prefer to receive formal feedback at least every 6 months, and 60% stated that they would like to receive formal feedback or appraisals every 1 to 3 months. Now, as someone who's heavily entrenched in the field of human capital, human resources, I believe that feedback should be continuous and constant and daily. Now, what does that mean? Daily feedback might include a 45 to 90 second at the end of the day, knocking on the office. Hey, good job today. Here's what you really did great. Here are some areas I can help you with. Maybe a minute, minute and a half. And then at the end of every week on a Friday, it might be a 10, 15-minute sit down. At the end of a quarter, every 3 months, it might be a 45, 60-minute review process. And then at the end of the year, it might be a 2 to 3 hour formal discussion. So when employees, especially Gen Ys, receive a performance appraisal, the formal one at the end of the year, nothing they read should be a surprise. Because if they read anything on that appraisal that surprises them, that represents a failure of the performance appraisal feedback model. Feedback should be constant, it should be continuous, and here we're talking about informal feedback. And for my own employees, we're talking once a day check-ins at the end of the day.
Vincent, what kind of challenges are organizations having sort of coping with some of these changes that are expected?
Well, a lot of the challenges would be that the other demographics, mature baby boomers, are taught that a good employee means gritting your teeth and doing what you're told to do, even if you don't agree with it. Whereas younger demographics view being a good employee as someone who's willing to speak truth to power and challenge authority. So an older demographic might misinterpret that as disrespect, whereas a millennial, if they don't speak truth to power, they would view that as not respecting the organization enough to be concerned that it might be going off the cliff. So these are dynamic changes, and these changes are, Vishali, are mitigating because every year more millennials are going to position of power. So we have organizations where millennials are now reporting to other millennials, and by next decade, the number of millennials reporting to other millennials is only going to increase. So this is an issue that is simply being mitigated by the passage of time.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's talk about 53% of millennials have been disappointed by a lack of personal development or training on the job. It is also important to get training and development plans in place early as they ensure satisfaction to your millennial professionals. Now keep in mind, total compensation also includes non-monetary forms of compensation. Being able to train and develop your millennials is also part of the total compensation package, in the sense that you're willing to invest in your millennials. Now, I mentioned on the slide that 53% of millennials are disappointed by the lack of personal development and training programs, and that is often cited as a reason to move on to another employment opportunity. Now, millennials have grown up being told that they are capable of achieving anything, and this confidence means that they crave responsibility early in their careers. Now let's talk about the use of integrated talent management technology. Now, an integrated approach provides seamless support throughout the entire life cycle of an employee, from the moment of hiring, through promotion, through separation, through retirement. I ensure that all my clients set up an alumni database. So even how companies exit their employees is vital, because the alumni database tends to be a source of business opportunities as these millennials go on to other positions of power in other companies. Here we're talking full cycle recruitment, from the offer letter to termination and even retirement. Now, revenues for companies with integrated talent management strategies are 26% more likely to have higher revenue. So for example, when a millennial wants to leave your company, a traditional approach might trying to convince them to stay, but usually that doesn't work. And also, it's not bad that they're leaving because companies no longer want employees to stay for 40 years and to give them a gold watch. So when your millennial says, look, I'm taking another opportunity, instead of trying to talk them out of it, say, welcome to our alumni community, right? And that way, even though the working relationship is fleeting, the professional relationship endures. Because I find people from my own alumni database from the different companies I work with as a source of business opportunities going forward. So millennials are more likely to keep the relationships permanent even after they physically separate from the company. Now, the benefits of having an integrated talent management system is more strategic hiring, because remember, the underutilized applicant pool are former employees. They've left your company, they've grown and developed with other companies, and they may be perfect for another opportunity at your own company. They've been trained, you have already vetted them. So by having an integrated talent management platform, we have more strategic hiring, improved employee experiences, and that equals happier employees. Now let's talk about happier employees. The traditional performance appraisal structure of, I'm going to give you a goal. If you achieve my goal, you'll be successful. If you're successful, you will be happy. That tried and tried, notice I'm not saying tried and proven, but that tried and tried method is cognitively broken. The way human beings are hardwired based on neurobiology and cognitive science is that employees that start off at a point of happiness have a higher propensity of success. So it's not like here's a goal, if you can achieve it, you'll be happy. No, it's if we start off in a place of happiness, we have a higher rate of success. And I covered this in a previous webinar that people are welcome to check out. So the goal is success, happiness, that is cognitively broken. So now we're talking about improving employee experiences. So they start off as a place of happiness. Another benefit of integrated talent management systems is the ability to tap into the expertise of partners. Here, we're making decisions less on an intuitive hunch and more on data drivers that we get from other experts and other partners that take part in our talent management system. And we also want to use the data from a talent management system to drive more business decisions. So in conclusion, we're talking about more strategic hiring, improved employee experiences which make them more happy, the ability to tap into expertise of partners through the alumni database, and the ability to access data points to make smarter decisions. Now let's talk about gamification platforms for career development. Now, what is gamification? Well, it's the application of elements of game playing, scoring, competition, rules of engagement to other activities such as what? Such as training and development, which really brings us back to our previous slides. Now, gamification is defined as taking the essence of games, attributes such as engagement, transparency, design, and competition, and applying them to a range of real-world processes inside of an organization. It could include marketing, call center management, and especially leadership development. Now, gamification uses behavior motivating techniques from traditional and social games to non-game environments and looks more like a loyalty program that helps achieve real business goals. Now, as per Gardner, gamification is being introduced by businesses all over the world as the use of game mechanics and experience. Well, that's really becoming part of millennials' day-to-day experiences. Gamification is not just makes employees feel recognized and rewarded for their achievements, but it is a way to reward millennials beyond traditional compensation, because when we talk about a total reward program, we talk about non-monetary forms of compensation, and gamification is a way that millennials could achieve instant recognition for their achievements. We also mentioned in a previous slide that millennials want to be recognized for their achievements, and gamification provides a mechanism to do that. That's pretty much set on autopilot. Now, how can human resources use gamification? Well, it improves talent acquisition and management. It can cultivate corporate culture and retain valued employees, because remember, the culture of an organization, those values can be embedded in the rules of engagement of your gamification process. Thirdly, gamification can also motivate employees to learn and participate in training, because it's an easy way for them to benchmark their progress, which feels highly rewarding. It also incentivizes paperwork and other administrative requirements, because with gamification, you have an automatic digital trail of who has received what training, when, in what order, and how likely they were to understand the training that they just underwent. So gamification is really a map to career success, because it is a way to correlate success on a certain game to success in the organization.
Hey, Vincent, is there any way you can provide an example of how you've seen gamification deployed successfully in an organization?
Yeah, well, gamification is very popular with the U.S. Army. You know, if you look at simulations, many companies are using a software called Capsum, where they get to run people who are not yet in formal leadership they get to lead and run $100 million company via a simulation, an environment that's safe both to succeed and fail. And if we look at a lot of training and development, computer-based training, it does not let you go on to the next level of training until you've achieved a certain score on the previous training. So another example how gamification works for companies is anytime training is computer-based as opposed to having a live instructor such as myself in a classroom. That would not be an example of gamification. But anytime I move the training development to a computer-based training, well, that's being scored. If you want to look at Rosetta Stone and language softwares like that, Duolingo, which actually do not let users progress to the next level until they've scored a certain benchmark on the previous level. So those would be some examples. And I think, Vishali, that leads us into some examples from Fortune 500 companies.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I'll continue with that. Now, Silicon Valley uses gamification for many of their external products. If you look at the entire marketing approach of Facebook, Facebook wants you to spend as much time on Facebook as possible. So the way that they encourage you to share and like other people's posts, well, that's all scored. That's an example of gamification. LinkedIn scores how many people are in your network. Now, an aspect of gamification is scoring. It allows millennials to benchmark. So people are less likely to develop their network if it's not scored, because it's hard for them to intuitively get that sense of accomplishment compared to every time you make another connection on LinkedIn, the number of people in your network goes up. So that's another example of gamification. And LinkedIn is certainly a top company. And then if we look at hackathons, right, something that's very prominent with Facebook employees, that's a form of gamification where employees are encouraged to stay up all evening in order to solve a certain software problem. As I mentioned before, the U.S. Army uses gamification, right? You want to create a simulation of a hostile situation as opposed to having to throw people directly in a hostile situation. We have great software such as Treehouse, which is gamification of goal tracking. Mint.com, which was financial software. They use gamification to encourage its customers to have more financial security. We have Recycle Bank. That is customer loyalty through gamification. Capsum, I mentioned before, that's gamification of running a company. And then we have Keas, Keas, that is a wellness platform which uses gamification to encourage people to think about their own wellness. And that also reminds us of a Fitbit. And any video game is really about the gamification of possible socialization, how to work with others, how to cooperate. So gamification is becoming so endemic. I believe as the years go by, we will no longer use the word gamification because it will be so endemic to computer-based training in general. It will be as if a fish never talks about the water, right? Because it's such a part of their environment. So gamification will become such a part of the training development environment, it will no longer be discussed as a separate entity. So those are some examples of gamification. And then let us conclude with some key takeaways. Now, in conclusion, we talked about how a clear path for career progression includes a modern workplace that embraces the new digital landscape. We're talking about competitive salaries and how competitive salaries are a high priority for millennials. We had an excellent question before. Do millennials care about experience or career progression? Well, I believe that it's only fair to millennials to give them the same opportunities to earn as the generations before them. So I believe that millennials do care about economic security as well. Secondly, we talked about feedback, how feedback with professional trainers for millennials on a regular basis is something that they say is important to them, how training and development is a priority for millennials, almost on par as learning and development, but not to the exclusion of, as we mentioned before. Another takeaway is about giving millennials the opportunity to move around different functions within the business. Here we're talking about job rotation. Job rotation bleeds into the most common form of training, on the job training. And here we're talking about how that lends itself to flat organizational structures and a form of compensation called broadbanding. Which is beyond the scope of this talk, but broadbanding is a way to develop comp plans which reflects flat organizations, which reflects companies using job rotation as a form of on-the-job training specifically for millennials. And then finally, we touched upon gamification platforms and how they are used for career development for employees and even in influencing customer behavior. Remember, your millennial employees are the brand ambassadors to your company, and they do have a megaphone, and that megaphone is called social media. So let's treat them with the respect they deserve and really look to nurture them so they can succeed us as the next generation. That's all I have today. Vaishali, tossing it back to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Vincent. That was really informative. I'm actually going to go ahead and pass it over to Gaurav to talk a little bit more about some values and important things around Sarder Learning, and just a little bit about Gaurav. He is the Global Operations and Strategic Marketing Head at Sarder Learning. So Gaurav, I'm going to just pass it over to you.
Thank you, Vaishali. Thank you so much. And thank you, Vincent, for this amazing presentation and insight. It was I was delighted to kind of hear these insights, and definitely gives us so many inputs to manage our own teams on a day-to-day basis. So it was absolutely fantastic. So organizations are constantly evolving, and so is the role of HR and L&D teams. We'll agree to that. And more so when teams are responsible for training and development of global teams with multicultural diversity and aspirations. Now, if you all are looking at a constant reinforcement of the strategical and tactical inputs to create the right impact within your own organizations, please do browse through our exclusive platform, which is www.sarderlearning.com, and have a look at some of these strategic insights from Vincent and such top leaders from Fortune 1000 organizations, Ivy League universities, and some of the best-selling authors. These people are talking about so many dimensions of retaining and managing the talent, right from the millennials to the highest level. Please do have a look at the platform, and if this excites you, please do not hesitate to use the coupon code SLWelcome35, and you would get an introductory discount as well. Happy browsing through the platform, happy learning. Cheers. Thank you, Vaishali.
Oops, sorry about that, everybody. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, Gaurav, for that. Vincent, I did want to get to a couple of questions here that we have. There's one question here asking, what are some of the most important talent development or people programs that companies of the future need to offer, such as job rotation, career conversations, experiential learning, career pathing?
Well, what's interesting about all the things that you mentioned don't necessarily inflate a company's SG&A costs. So those are all good ideas. I believe the conversation first starts with having the conversation with your millennial population, because one of the best ways we can respect millennials is not just lumping them into all one category. They come from a diversity of backgrounds, so to use customer engagement surveys to find out from specific millennials which aspects of training and development you consider most to least important, and it gives companies the ability to tailor make their approaches. Now, job rotation is great, but you might have some millennials that really rather focus on depth and specificity of their job, and to gain task significance by developing more subject matter expertise in a field. You may have another millennial which may want to develop generalist practitioner abilities across the organization horizontally. So I do think customer engagement surveys listing all of the options that you mentioned and having your employee population in a survey tell them what's important to them, and then you could customize the approach, because every company operates from a different competitive advantage in the value chain. So we want that competitive advantage that's unique to companies be reflected in a unique approach, which really can be unearthed by having these engagement surveys with millennials.
Okay, great. Okay, we've gone ahead and also launched a quick poll to find out who, if anybody is actually interested in taking up some additional training. So if you can go ahead and click on one of your answers, that would be great. Also, just a little bit about Sarder Learning. Sarder Learning is actually a micro-learning knowledge platform that brings the world's best Fortune 500 companies, CXOs, Ivy League professors, and best-selling authors together to share industry-wide best practices related to leadership and management. Sarder Learning, under 13 distinct categories, has a rapidly growing course library relevant across multiple domains with well-defined specific learning paths and scenario-based learning. It's an intuitive and responsive learning management system environment that makes it easy to track one's learning journey and take courses at your convenience. We also have a lot more webinars coming up, so you can go on to neccomlearning.com/webinars to register. Also, please follow our social media pages to get the latest technology updates, and you'll find those in the GoToWebinar chat window. And Vincent, are there any other concluding thoughts before we end today's webinar?
I will say that millennials have something in common with every generation of employees. People want respect. They don't want to be marginalized. They want to know that their voices matter and they're heard and they're part of the decision-making process as opposed to just being told what to do. So what all generations have in common, from matures to boomers to millennials to echo boomers, is that all people want respect, and ultimately we all want to self-actualize, millennials included.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Vincent, and thanks to you all for joining us today. And if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@neccomlearning.com at any time. And we hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses, and everyone have a great day. Thank you.